Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. In this video, we'll be discussing about various data types and variables in Java. In the previous video, we had discussed about various keywords in Java, and before that, we had tried running our simple Hello World program. Coming to variables and data types, there are 8 primitive data types in Java. What are those? As you can see them on your screen, those are nothing but byte, short, int, long, char, float, double, and boolean. These data types are also being referred to as simple types. These 8 primitive data types can be categorized into 4 groups: integers, floating point numbers, characters, booleans. In integers, these are byte, short, int, and long. In floating point numbers, there are float and double, and characters contains our char primitive data type, and boolean. So boolean group is for a boolean data type. We can use these primitive data types to construct our arrays, construct our own classes. One important point to note here is that these 8 primitive data types form the basis for all other data types in Java. Let's talk about integer. There are 4 types of integers in Java: byte, short, int, and long. All of these are assigned positive and negative values. Java doesn't support unsigned positive integers like some of the traditional programming languages do. Java doesn't do that. Byte, it is the smallest integer type. It is a signed 8-bit type. The size of it is 1 byte, as you can see on your screen, and the range of a byte data type is from -128 to 120 plus 127. The default value of byte data type is 0. Where we can use this data type, let's say we want to read the data from a file, or we want to save memory in large arrays, we want to work with network string, we want to work with raw binary data. So in all these cases, we can use byte data type. Now, how do we declare a variable of type byte? We use a byte keyword. We'll declare all of these 8 data types and assign them some values as well when we write a program into Eclipse in few minutes. Now, coming to next data type, which is short. Short is a assigned 16-bit type. Its size is 2 byte, as you can see. Its range is from -32,768 to 32,767. It is not being frequently used. The default value of short data type is also 0. And how do we declare a variable of type short? We just use a short keyword, as you can see on your screen. Now let's come to our third data type, which is int. It is the most commonly used data type in Java. It is assigned 32-bit of type. Here is the range of int data type. As you can see, it's a fairly large range as compared to byte and short. And what is the default value of integer data type? It is 0. How do we declare a variable of type int? We use int keyword. Now, question is where we can use this data type. Let's say we want to control loops. There we use integers as to initialize variables, and for all other operations like increment and putting a conditional operation as well. We also use them as an index in our arrays. Now you'd be thinking why we don't use byte or short keywords when we don't need a large range. So here's the thing, especially when we want to use them in an expression. So whenever, if you try to use byte or short into an expression, they automatically gets converted to int. And that's why we prefer using int keyword. Let's see an example for it. Here I am on Eclipse. So we had talked about how do we declare a byte variable. So we do just byte space and assign some value to it. So this is done. We have declared a variable of byte type byte. The variable name is my byte, and we have assigned a value as 10. Now let's declare a variable of type short. So we have declared a variable my short, which is of type short, and we have assigned the value as 20. Let's declare a variable of type int. So my integer variable is of type int, and it is holding the value as 100. Now, when we use byte or short in an expression, they gets promoted to int when the expression is evaluated. Let's see an example for it. Now, what we have done here, we have just added our byte and my short and tried to assign our result to a data type of short. We know that short can easily hold a value of 30. You can see here this result is 30 and short can easily hold it. But if you hover your mouse here, you see that it is showing you an error, cannot convert from int to short. The reason for this is whenever byte and short are being used into an expression, they gets promoted to int. And that's why it is complaining about making the result data type as integer. So let's say we make integer and let's try to print it as well. So we see that the result has been printed, which is 30. Now let's come to our next data type, which is long. Long is a signed 64-bit type and is useful for occasions where our int data type cannot support that range. Long data type contains a fairly large range, as you can see here. Now, how do we declare a variable of type long? We use a long keyword. The default value of long is 0 capital L. We'll see an example for this as well. So here you see I do have a declared a variable mylong which is of type long, and I have assigned the value as 100. Now coming to our next group, which is a floating point numbers. These are also being known as real numbers. We use these in expressions that require fractional precision. For example, we know that when we divide 3 by 2, what do we get? We get the result as 1.5, which is a floating point number and not a whole number. To store this number in a variable, we'll have to make use of float or double data type. We cannot use int or long or short and byte data type to hold this value because we might lose the fractional part. We'll also see an example what happens if we try to store real numbers into integer. What happens? Let's try to do that. So how do we declare float? Float. Here also we see it is giving us an error. What is the error? Cannot convert from double to float. So here is the thing. If we don't append a small f to our float number, it is taking it as a double. So let's append a small f. So now this my float is of type float and not of double. Now let's try to assign this value to an integer and we'll see what happens. So we get an error as cannot convert from float to int. Now let's try to print these float and long variable as well. So we see that our float and long values has been printed on console. Float is 10.5 and long number, whatever we had assigned the my variable as my long. Let's take one more example. Let's say we want to calculate the square root of 5. We know that square root of 5 is not a whole number, it's a floating point number. So here also we can make use of float and double data types. Java implements the standard IEEE 754 set of floating point types and operators. There are two kinds of floating point types as you see on your screen. It is float and double. Float is for single precision numbers and double is for double precision numbers. Float contains single precision value which uses 32 bits of storage. And now question is how do we declare a variable of type float? We already declared it, float space identifier name, and we can assign a value as well. The default value of float is 0.0f. Now let's come to our specific use case of where we can use float, where we can use double. So for example, where we don't need much precision, we can use our float. For example, when we want to denote a price of an item or set of items, or let's say a cup of coffee is costing you $4.15. So we can use float here as it doesn't require much precision. Now let's come to our next data type, which is double. It contains double precision values, which uses 64 bits to store a number. As you can see here, the range of the double data type is huge. Double precision is a bit faster than single precision on some of the modern processors that have been optimized for mathematical calculation. For examples, when we are doing scientific calculations, we need high accuracy, like more than 7 to 10 digits in decimal, or even more than 15 digits, 20 digits. It gives you that kind of accuracy, which we can't get in float data type. Most of the mathematical functions like square root of a number, or trigonometric functions like tan, cos, sine, beta, they return double values. The default value of double is 0.0d. Now let's come to our next data type, which is characters. Java uses Unicode to represent characters. What is Unicode? Unicode defines a fully international character set, which can be used to represent all of the characters found in all human languages. In Java, char is of 2 bytes, unlike other programming languages. Let's try declaring a char variable and assigning some values to it. So this is how we declare a char variable. Char here is the data type, and my char is the identifier, which we also say it is a variable, and we have assigned the character a to it. We can print it as well, and we'll also see what happens if we try to assign an integer to my char variable. Let's do that. And we'll print them as well. Now let's try to run our program. And we do see that initially my char variable printed a, which we had assigned, as you can see on your screen. But next time when we assigned 22 character, it didn't printed a. It took the ASCII value of 20 and it printed it out. So that's what it happens. Let's try to give a number which we are familiar. ASCII value for capital A is 65. Let's try to give 65 to my char. What happens? Or let's try to give 66. What happens? We'll run our program, and we do see that my char is printing capital B because 66 is the ASCII value for uppercase B. Now let's come to our next data type, which is Boolean. So Boolean is for logical values. It can have one of the two possible values like true or false. Where we can use this data type? So we can use this as the written type of various methods in case of relational operators, in case of conditional expressions where we use if and else, in case of control statements where we use loops like while, do while and all. So we can use Boolean data type there as well. Let's try to declare a Boolean variable in our program. Let's try to run this program. So what we have done, initially we initialize my Boolean variable as true, and then we have assigned it false to it. So we do see that initially it prints, first it prints true and then it prints false, the way we have done in our program. Now let's talk about non-primitive data types. As you can see here, there are few data types which are non-primitive. What are those? Those are string, arrays, classes, and interface. What are strings? A string is an object that represents a sequence of characters. We do have java.lang.string class, which is being used to create a string object. We'll get to know more about the strings when in our upcoming videos. Now let's talk about second non-primitive data type, which is arrays. Arrays are kind of homogeneous data structures. They can store values of a specific data type, and we can access those values by an array index. Now, third non-primitive data type, classes. We have used class keyword into our previous program when we ran our Hello World program, but we'll get to know more about it when we talk about object-oriented principles like inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation. So class is I will give you a brief idea about what is class. Class is a blueprint which includes all of your data. All of the class contents remain inside curly braces as we had seen in our program. It can have various fields like variables and methods, and those methods being used to describe the behavior of an object. Now let's talk about our fourth non-primitive data type. So like a class, an interface can have methods and variables, but methods declared in an interface are by default abstract. So we won't have a body of those methods, but in class you had seen that we did have the bodies of those methods as well. Now let's talk about variables. The variable is the basic unit of storage in Java. How do we declare a variable? How do we define a variable? So we have all seen that. So if you see here in our program, we have declared a variable of type byte. If we don't assign any value to it, it will be just called as the declaration. And till here, we haven't assigned it. But if we do equal 10, then we have assigned a value of 10 to our variable myByte. And similarly, we have done it for other variables, like we have assigned a value of 20 to myShort, we have assigned a value of 100 to myInteger. So as you see here, we have given some fixed number to all these variables. Can we initialize these variables dynamically? Yes, we can do. Let's try to do that. As you can see here, we have a variable r, which we haven't initialized as a fixed number. It is being calculated as sum of variable p and q. Let's try to print the variable r. So we see that we have got the variable of r is 15. If what will happen if we try to change the value of p and q? Of course, the value of r will change. So this is not a constant initialization. Here the value of r is being calculated based on what is the value of p and q. Now there is a question for all of you. Which data type you used mostly when you write Java programs? Let us know in the comments. That's all we had for this video. I hope you got some information about variables and data types in Java and how it works, how you can declare a variable, how you can initialize a variable, what are various data types, and everything. If you have any questions or suggestions, let us know via comments. I'm looking forward to connect with all of you.